Okay. Hi. Welcome to ADHDkidscanthrive.com. And I'm here today with Jesse J. Anderson, who is a fellow that I found on Twitter several years ago. He actually also is on Instagram and has a newsletter. And he is a man who's advocating for adults with ADHD because he has ADHD himself. And you deem yourself as an ADHD creative, correct, Jesse?
Yeah. I've always been even before, I knew I had ADHD. I've always been a creative, meaning just like I'm creative in kind of all the different fields, creating, design, and I do development, and I create stuff there. I've done video stuff, and I'm kind of all over the map. So I just sort of, I call myself an ADHD creative because I think once I found out that I had ADHD, it all sort of made sense. Everything sort of came together at that point.
Okay. And how old were you when you found out you had ADHD?
Yeah, so it was about 5 years ago. So I was 36.
Okay.
So pretty far into, my adulthood, and suddenly found out like, oh, this really explains a lot of things. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you make it that far in life without figuring it out?
Yeah, so I mean, I was never I'm the combined type. So I'm not just inattentive. So I did have some hyperactivity like as a child, but I was never like the wild one jumping all off the walls and stuff like that. So I think I never really stood out enough that anyone knew to do anything about it. I mean, I was going through my report cards recently, and every single teacher is has so much potential, but never does any homework, is late on everything, aces his tests, but gets distracted in class, all those sort of stereotypical things. And yet no one just, I think a lot of people, especially I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and they just didn't really, if you weren't the kid getting in trouble all the time, especially the boy that's running in circles, then they probably weren't going to look into ADHD. And I wasn't hyper enough or getting in enough trouble that they ever really even thought about it.
Okay. And then, so let me ask you this, because you do have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that school was less maybe rigorous back in the 80s and 90s compared to the way it is now, where it may have been more difficult? Is it more, do you think it's more difficult for kids with ADHD to get through school without getting diagnosed versus when you were a kid?
Oh, I see. Sort of like the slipping through the cracks. Yeah, I think that is an interesting question because, yeah, sure. I have friends that also were never kind of diagnosed back then. And now our daughter, she was diagnosed, she's 11 now. She was diagnosed around the same time I was. So when she was in, I think, first grade, and her teacher actually, which I don't think they're supposed to do this, but her teacher actually reached out to us and suggested hey, she might have ADHD, and it's something that's going to be a bigger problem the further she gets in school, and you might want to look into it now.
Okay.
And that was kind of really early for us. And yeah, and I don't know how many years may have gone by before we found out that for her. So it was great that sort of came up. And I do think there's a lot of things in school these days that cause those issues to crop up pretty early, it seems like.
That's what I think. I think school nowadays is probably more rigorous than it ever has been in the scheme of our lifetime. So I think kids get called out way earlier. Because teachers know the rigor's coming, and it's a lot less unforgiving. And so it's harder if you have ADHD to be a kid to kind of keep up with the standards of what school is set for.
Yeah, we really kind of noticed, I think right around third, fourth grade is when it was really oh, this is we're having to get involved a lot. I mean, obviously we're trying to be involved parents, but it's oh, yes, we're having to be involved a lot with the schoolwork and stuff, because otherwise it's not going to happen. And an hour of sitting at the kitchen table, this is us early figuring out what's going to help motivate, but an hour sitting at the kitchen table to get 2 math problems done, right, and that sort of stuff, where it's just this is not really working, and we don't really know what to do about it. And we're just sort of knowing that other parents are kind of going through the same thing, and not having the resources, or not knowing that they need resources, just being bang their head against the wall. Like how do we help support the kid, but get them to do the work, because they're just not doing any work, and you're just sort of like stuck and lost and not sure what to do about it.
So did your parents do that for you? That's my question. Like, did they have to do that for you? Did they sit with you pounding through the math and the reading? Okay, they did.
Yeah, but I mean, to a point, like I think through elementary school, they did a lot. And then kind of in junior high, I basically just stopped telling them that I had homework, and I just sort of took everything into my own hands, and they would ask and stuff. And I mean, honestly, I just lied a lot. I just told my parents that everything was fine in school, and then I'd make up excuses when the report card came in. And I was just sort of like trying to do my best to make it by. And luckily for me, I tested really well. So I would take all my tests, and even though I wouldn't do any homework, I was learning, but I just couldn't force myself to do homework. So I just hid it from my parents and didn't let them know that I had it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. So and they just didn't look at your report card?
Well, they did. There was always battles when the report card came out, but my parents have ADHD too. I mean, they debate it, but to me, it seems obvious they have ADHD. And I think they just forgot. Like the report card would come, we'd have a fight for like a week, and then they would just sort of forget about it, and we'd move on, and it wouldn't be a big deal.
That's great. That's sound advice in itself. Maybe we should just all look the other way. On. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Jesse, tell me the kind of advocacy work that you're doing now. Kind of what's your focus?
Yeah. So just sort of really mostly in the last like year and a half or so, I've jumped in. I started writing online and sharing just sort of the different things I've learned, and found that it really started resonating with other people. And they the things that I found really insightful and really helped me, lo and behold, that helps other people too. And so I really found sort of a love for learning a lot of stuff, and then sort of breaking it down into really easy to learn concepts. Because for me, like I love to like hyper focus and learn a whole bunch of stuff, but not like learn about my brain that way. But not everyone with ADHD loves to do those deep dives into that topic. So I think a lot of what I try to do is break it down in a way that's really easily kind of digestible and understandable. Like I love to create kind of like aha moments in like content that I create. So people read something that I've done. And especially, I think a lot of people, a lot of adults with ADHD don't know that they have it. And so I think the stat, I don't know if this is up to date, but a stat was like 90% of adults with ADHD are undiagnosed. So there's a lot of people out there that I think are struggling and not realizing that they're struggling, just like I was till I was 36. And in the online I'm in sort of like online creative community and entrepreneur community. I think there's a lot of people with ADHD in there. And I hear every week, just as I kind of share my own experience and things I've learned about ADHD and things that are working for me, more and more people finding like, oh, this really resonates with me. This really sounds familiar. I need to look into this more. And that's been extremely satisfying for me to feel like I get to be part of their story of finding out this huge moment, and really kind of, that moment that can really change your life. And so it's been really, really exciting being able to be a part of that and helping people out in that way.
Oh, that's so good. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
I
do think it's amazing too that so many people still haven't figured out. And I have heard a lot of people do figure out they had ADHD because their kids are coming in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Getting called out in school and getting diagnosed, and then it becomes apparent to the parents that they have it. So it's a very typical circle.
Yes. Yeah. I hear that a lot. A lot of parents, their kid gets diagnosed, and then they're looking through those stuff and like, oh, check. These all are me.
Sound like me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me ask you, Jesse, when you're talking to adults in your own journey, what in your parenting, also an ADHD kid, like what do you think are like, what are words of wisdom that you've kind of gathered within yourself about how to help yourself and your child kind of get through life in a good way?
Yeah, I think two of the most important things for especially helping my kids like tackle the homework and get things done and stuff like that. Number one, encouragement can go so far. I think there's something about it with an ADHD brain. You're so used to hearing like and getting like negative feedback just all over the place, like hurry up, come on, get your thing, let's go. Like all that stuff just really builds up, and it really kind of erodes that self-esteem. Which as a parent, it's so hard. It's so hard because I know about that, but it's also like, hurry up, come on, we gotta go. And so you're like trying to weigh that. And yeah, but so I think encouragement really just has an overwhelming effect for the ADHD brain, because it just really helps motivate and encourage, and helps encourage. It really just helps drive them. And I think that's so important to help them feel great and help them feel loved and empowered. And so encouragement, I think, is number one. And the second thing is, for me, the thing that I think made the most impact of learning about ADHD is learning about the what Dr. William Dodson calls the interest-based nervous system, which I call it the 4 C's of motivation, which is captivate, create, compete, complete. And so what those are is captivate is like finding something that's interesting, like it captivates your attention. That's one way to motivate. The second one is create. Anytime you're doing something creative, like for my daughter, she loves to like draw animals. So we'll like let her draw animals between math problems and things like that. And that helps kind of motivate her through that process.
Okay.
The third one, compete, creating kind of a challenge. And it's kind of like there's like that Goldilocks zone of like, you don't want it to be too hard, but you want it to be hard enough that you can like strive for it and feel like, yeah, I'm going to take on that challenge. And then the last one, complete, is just kind of about building up that urgency, using timers. I pretty much always have timers going all day, all day long.
Okay. What kind of timers? Like a stopwatch or?
Visual timers. So there's the time timer, which is a big one. There's also like, I have one of those little, it's like the little Google display, and you can just say, hey, set a timer for 10 minutes. And then it pops up a little counting down timer. And I do that all
What's that called?
The time.
The Google display?
It's the Google Nest Hub.
Okay.
So it's just like a little display. I have one right under my monitor, so I use it all the time. Just to, it does a bunch of other things. All I pretty much use it for is the timers, and then it has like rotating photos. So I have photos of my family on there, which is good for me because with my hyperfocus, I can like it sounds terrible, but I think when you have ADHD, you understand, like you forget about everything and everybody. Like you're just sort of focused on your thing. And so I have rotating pictures of my family right there to remind me like, oh yeah, I should stop work and go because I love my family. There they are. I should go be with them. So yeah, that's what I use that for. And timers are huge. So yeah, the 4 C's of motivation, I use that all the time for helping my daughter get homework done. So we'll set a timer, and then so we'll do something like, okay, let's do 5 minutes of working on the problem, and then we'll do 5 minutes of create. So we'll do like of drawing a kitten or something like that, because she loves to do that. Or we will like create a challenge of like, let's see how many problems you can get done. Let's see if you can get 5 problems done in 5 minutes. And again, it's about finding that Goldilocks zone, because if you say too many problems, then it's like she'll freeze up and not want to do anything.
Okay. And then is she able to transition in yourself? Like, so when you set the timer, it's probably like, I'm going to get this bit of a project done in this in 15 minutes or whatever. Does your brain follow the rules of the timer?
Sometimes. I mean, it's definitely not consistent. I think the trick is the transition has to be really easy. Like for the doing math problems and then doing the kitten, it helps because like she's already holding the pencil, she's already on the paper, we just do it on the same paper. And so it's an easier transition to just be like, oh, now I'm drawing a kitten, and then now I'm back on the math problem, like right there. Because if the transition is, oh yeah, go play with your brother in the other room, it's like, well, it's going to take 15 minutes to get her out of that and back to the math, and then it might be a fight for that because the transition is so hard. So I think the idea is making those transitions really clean, really easy to do, and
relatable. Yes, because I know it was like get up and go walk or go, to clear your head. But then as a parent trying to help your kid get something done, it's like, oh my God, like if I have them like go step outside to like get some fresh air and just change the mindset, we're looking at like a 30-minute transition. And then we're adding 30 minutes to the homework. And then we're getting fatigue and all of that. So that's very wise advice because
I mean, I think we're gonna have to figure out how it works as just, as they get older, my oldest is 11 right now. So she's just reaching the teenage years. And I'm sure that's going to be a whole new battlefield to kind of figure out what will work for her. Like, I imagine that drawing kittens probably isn't going to work, but hey,
Maybe.
I'm going to hang on to that as long as we can.
Yeah. You know what? I just talked to a woman who has ADHD, and she's art has saved her life, her academic life, all through college. When a parent is frustrated with their child, that is probably the time where encouragement is probably the most needed. Not maybe even if it's in the moment, but it's probably shortly thereafter, to create healing and good feelings.
Right.
And resiliency to be able to carry on. So how do you encourage? What do you recommend for encouragement? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think for one thing, like when I get frustrated and like maybe I say something I didn't mean to say to the kid, I really try really hard to make sure that we have a debrief afterwards, and I try to explain, apologizing, and try to, sit down next to her, or him or her on the couch or on their bed or whatever, and try to get at their level and really just sort of own up to like, hey, I messed up. I was really frustrated and I'm sorry the way that I responded or whatever it is, and really try to explain like, and for me, because I know a lot of like ADHD thing about like rejection sensitive dysphoria, or there's the, what is it? The Hulk smash. There's like the brick wall. I can't remember the name of. I'm sorry. Can I look this up really quick?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember.
The brick wall. Are you having a brick wall moment?
Oh, the wall of awful. That's what it is. Okay, I'll jump
the
back
wall
in.
of what?
Wall of awful.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay, so let me jump into. Okay. So yeah, and then I will talk about the wall of awful, which is it's the idea by Brendan Mahan, and it's basically we have this wall that makes it really hard. There's like the thing we want to do that we know we need to do kind of on the other side of the wall, and we just can't get there because there's this wall. And Brendan says it's like basically, as we talked earlier about kind of the self-esteem, all these negative messages we hear, those are like bricks we're adding to the wall. So we're like building up this wall with that makes it hard to make this move. And there's several ways to do it, but one way that comes easy that's not a good result is Hulk smash through the wall. Basically, that's when you're like, I want to do the thing, and you can't do it, and you're just like, fine, I'll do the thing. And you just sort of like charge through it and smash through it. And that's something that, my daughter and I have talked about a lot, because we really kind of connect with like, oh yeah, sometimes I can't find the right motivation. And so I Hulk smash, and then I end up with this mess that I have to kind of apologize for later. So that's a little bit tangentially related to the encouragement thing that you said, but I find that that's really important, that we kind of have that same language, and we can talk to each other about like, oh man, we really had a wall of awful there, and that was a bummer. Like, how can we sort of like, what's a better way to approach that next time? And the other thing with like encouragement is not qualifying it. I think by default, a lot of people want to say like, well, I don't want to say good job because you did this little thing, because you didn't do this other really big thing. But encouraging that little thing is such a motivator. Like, I used to think of it like telling me that I did a great job at something is like a cheat code for motivating me, because it's automatically going to make me want to do that thing more and more. And so I try to always remember that, like even the little things, like that little bit of encouragement, because again, it's like the negative messages are so often that try to anywhere you can get that positive message to kind of counterbalance it. Even just the tiniest thing, like, oh, thanks for putting away your shoes when like no one asked, like you just saw your shoes there and you put them in the thing. Thanks for doing that. And like trying to get in there, and that authentic encouragement, but it doesn't have to be a qualified level. Like, oh, I'll only encourage if it's hit like, level 10 or whatever, this like imaginary, just like all those little things trying to get in that encouragement can do so much for kids.
Yeah, that's huge. Because I think families spend a lot of time talking about the wall of awful.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's where the family focus is always on all the awful stuff and how to push through the awfulness. And it's key to focus on the little tiny things that are going well.
Yeah, for
to
sure.
balance that, to stay hopeful and positive, and it gets better in time, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Look at Jesse's a shining example.
I don't know about that, but I'm doing my best here.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much, Jesse. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.